What if rock's greatest guitar lessons happened in a Milwaukee living room with Les Paul himself? Steve Miller learned from legends, then sold 15 million copies of one album and vanished. A #1 global hit, followed by an album that crashed. Miller called the industry gangsters and crooks and walked away at his peak. Decades later, he'd use his Rock Hall induction to attack the very institution honoring him. This is how the Space Cowboy escaped on his own terms. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A quiet living room in the late 1940s. Picture a young Steve Miller, barely old enough to understand what he was witnessing, watching a master at work. The man sitting across from him wasn't just any guitar player. He was Les Paul, the inventor of the solid-body electric guitar, the architect of multi-track recording, the man who would rack up 25 hit records and change the sound of American music forever. And he was Steve Miller's godfather. Miller's father was a pathologist, a man of science and precision, but he maintained close friendships with legendary figures in American music. This wasn't a family that listened to music casually. This was a household where musical sophistication and high-fidelity recording were part of daily life, where genius was a regular dinner guest. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Les Paul didn't just visit, he taught. Miller stated it plainly, Les Paul was my godfather. Once I saw Les Paul play, I was hooked. Paul taught young Steve his first chords, but more importantly, he taught him something that would define his entire career. The understanding that the studio itself was an instrument, that technical precision could coexist with artistic vision, that efficiency and creativity weren't enemies. But when the Miller family moved to Dallas, Texas, Steve's education took a dramatic turn. Technical mastery was only half the equation. He needed the other half, and he found it in another family friend and blues titan, T-Bone Walker. Walker was everything Les Paul wasn't. Where Paul represented studio and technical innovation, Walker embodied raw performance power and authentic blues roots. Miller described Walker as the bridge between blues and jazz, and Walker gave him the counterbalance his education desperately needed. Walker taught Miller advanced guitar techniques and showmanship that went far beyond chord progressions. He taught him how to play guitar behind his head while doing the splits, a theatrical move that Miller noted was a very handy thing to know if you're gonna be in show business. This wasn't about gimmicks. This was about understanding that rock and roll was a full-body experience, that audiences needed more than sound. They needed spectacle, sweat, and soul. Think about what Miller had been given from Les Paul: technical finesse, studio mastery, the science of hit-making. From T-Bone Walker, blues authenticity, stage presence, the raw power of performance. This combination would explain everything that came later. His ability to pivot seamlessly from complex psychedelic blues rock to polished pop hits. His efficiency in the studio when his contemporaries drowned in excess. His understanding that commercial success and artistic integrity could coexist. After briefly attending college, Miller knew he needed to complete his education the only way that mattered, by proving himself in the crucible. In 1964, he relocated to Chicago and fully immersed himself in the Delta blues scene, playing alongside legends like Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, James Cotton, and Paul Butterfield. This wasn't tourism. This was baptism by fire, earning his blues credibility night after night in clubs where audiences could smell a fake from across the room. By 1966, drawn by the burgeoning counterculture and the promise of something new, Miller moved to the Bay Area. He formed the Steve Miller Band and quickly signed an unprecedented contract with Capitol Records in 1967. The trajectory was complete, from private lessons with virtuosos to proving himself in the toughest blues clubs in America. Miller had the pedigree, the chops, and the hunger. But as he was about to learn, none of that guaranteed success. The Steve Miller Band entered the San Francisco scene as a high pedigree act, uniquely positioned to blend the deep sources of American roots music with the psychedelic atmosphere transforming the culture. They were a mainstay of the scene, respected and talented. The record label had signed them with an unprecedented advance, betting heavily that Miller's combination of blues credibility and studio sophistication would translate into commercial gold. In February 1968, they recorded their debut album, Children of the Future, followed quickly by Sailor in October of the same year. But the commercial reality was brutal. Despite the unprecedented advance, despite the pedigree, despite the critical praise, Children of the Future drastically underperformed expectations, peaking at a devastating number 134 on the US Billboard chart. The follow-up Sailor fared better, reaching number 24 and featuring the early FM radio staple Living in the USA. But better wasn't good enough. The producers had invested heavily and they expected returns. The pressure was mounting. During this difficult period, the band suffered from extreme instability. The Steve Miller Band became marked by a constant revolving door of musicians, with Miller remaining the only consistent member. Co-founder Boz Scaggs and keyboardist Jim Peterman departed shortly after Sailor was completed. The internal chaos made fulfilling the high expectations nearly impossible. Miller was bleeding money, burning through the advance, watching bandmates leave, and facing the reality that artistic integrity didn't pay the bills. The winding, experimental ethos of the acid blues movement was a luxury he could no longer afford. The financial and creative pressure forced a decision. Miller had to abandon the experimental path and embrace the concise, hook-driven pop he understood through Les Paul's mentorship. The pivot point arrived in October 1973 with the release of a single that would change everything, The Joker.
I'm a sinner. I play my music.
The song embraced a simpler, radio-friendly rock sound. It was the opposite of the sprawling psychedelic experiments. It was tight, memorable, built for AM and FM radio rotation. And slowly, methodically, it climbed the charts. In January 1974, The Joker hit number 1 on the US Billboard Hot 100. The scrappy San Francisco act had finally broken through nationally. This wasn't about selling out. This was survival. This was the strategic mastery of popcraft that secured the band's future and allowed Miller to escape the financial strain of 5 brutal years. Following the success of The Joker, the Steve Miller Band entered a period of astonishing commercial dominance. Miller, now fully embracing the identity of the Space Cowboy, applied his hard-won knowledge of pop structure and studio efficiency with ruthless precision. The result was an endless flow of instantly recognizable hits. The defining success came in 1976 with the album Fly Like an Eagle. The title track peaked at number 2, but it was Rockin' Me that became the massive chart topper, hitting number 1 and staying there. The album was certified 4 times platinum in the US, selling 4 million copies and transforming the band into an arena-level act. Miller didn't rest. A year later, in 1977, Book of Dreams continued the platinum run, delivering major hits like Jet Airliner, Jungle Love, and Swing Town. The hits were coming so fast, so consistently, that the Steve Miller Band became synonymous with FM radio itself. Turn on your car stereo, and there they were. Walk into any party, any bar, any high school gym, and those songs were playing. But what separated Miller from his contemporaries wasn't just the hits. It was his approach to the studio. While other bands of the era drowned in excess, spending weeks trying to perfect a single drum sound, Miller famously eschewed the chaos. He criticized bands who used drugs and inefficiency to justify their process. Miller's discipline, honed by his early exposure to Les Paul's efficient methods, meant his band maximized hit density and avoided crippling debt. While others imploded, Miller delivered. The ultimate symbol of the band's cultural saturation arrived in 1978 with the release of Greatest Hits. This compilation received the Diamond Award for sales of over 15 million copies. It stands today as one of the 25 best-selling albums of all time. The ubiquity was complete. These songs were playing from every car stereo and FM radio across the country. The Steve Miller Band had become the undeniable soundtrack of a generation's youth. From 1973 through 1978, the numbers tell the story. The Joker went gold. Fly Like an Eagle went 4 times platinum. Book of Dreams went 3 times platinum. And the Greatest Hits compilation went diamond. Miller had done what seemed impossible. He'd maintained artistic credibility while conquering the commercial machine. But the machine that elevated him was also preparing to consume him. the Steve Miller Band reached one final, improbable commercial peak in 1982. The album Abracadabra was released in June, powered by the synth-tinged title track that became a global phenomenon, peaking at number 3 on the US Billboard chart and reaching number 1 in multiple international markets. The song itself had an almost whimsical origin. Miller had seen superstar Diana Ross take a fall while skiing in Idaho, which triggered the lyrics for a song he'd shelved for years. The result was another massive hit, proof that Miller still had the golden touch. But this success was the tipping point, not the launch pad. Having reached the pinnacle of pop success, Miller was profoundly disillusioned with the music industry. He frequently and famously described it as being full of gangsters and crooks. With the immense financial security provided by the Diamond-certified greatest hits, Miller had leverage, he had independence, and he used it to step back completely from the commercial machine. What happened next shocked the industry and confused fans. The decline was swift and breathtakingly steep. The release of Abracadabra in 1982 coincided with a drastic reduction in touring. The band had logged 28 shows that year. In 1983, they played 1. In 1984, 1. More critically, the follow-up album, Italian X-Rays, released in October 1984, failed spectacularly, peaking at a devastating number 106 on the US Billboard chart. This wasn't a gradual decline. This was a commercial collapse. But here's what fans didn't understand at the time. This was a deliberate act of commercial self-sabotage. Miller had delivered the contracted material, but he refused to participate in the promotional grind. He ignored the rising influence of MTV and music videos that defined 1980s pop success. This act of withdrawal, motivated by a desire to preserve artistic autonomy and escape the pressures of the record business, caused the band's visibility to plummet overnight. To fans who had grown accustomed to his music dominating the radio, the effect was shocking silence. The mystery of an iconic artist disappearing at the height of their career. The immediate commercial collapse following Abracadabra led to nearly a decade of obscurity. The momentum the Steve Miller Band had painstakingly built in the 1970s evaporated almost instantly. The years following the failure of Italian X-Rays were marked by Miller prioritizing personal satisfaction and niche artistic endeavors over chart relevance. During this period, albums were released, but they were generally ignored by the mainstream public and radio. Living in the 20th Century in 1986 and the blues tribute album Born to be Blue in 1988 were testaments to Miller's enduring commitment to the blues influences he had learned from T-Bone Walker. These efforts failed to penetrate the mainstream charts, proving how rapidly commercial relevance dissolves when an artist abandons promotion and mass touring. The long, quiet gap until his next commercially visible album, Wide River, in 1993, confirmed the loss of footing in the modern music landscape. This lost decade created a profound void for the classic rock audience. While the hits remained staples on FM radio, there was no new material to sustain the connection. Fans felt abandoned. Some critics suggested the band had become too soft, pointing to the synth-heavy sound of Abracadabra. Others simply assumed Miller had retired. For the casual listener, this period of low visibility meant they missed out on the true depth of Miller's creativity. Hidden gems like the psychedelic Going to Mexico from the No. 5 album, or the haunting track Journey from Eden, showcased the wide-ranging experimentation that was the initial promise of the band. These deeper cuts were overshadowed by the behemoth hits, yet they contained the creative spirit that drove the band's early work. Miller himself acknowledged the expectations. He noted that if he didn't perform the standards, The Joker, Fly Like an Eagle, Take the Money and Run, fans would be extremely disappointed. The hits had become both blessing and curse, defining him while constraining him. But here's the irony. This period of commercial withdrawal had a positive effect on his enduring legacy. By refusing to engage in the rapidly changing, often less creatively fulfilling landscape of 1980s music, Miller preserved the integrity of his 1974 to 1978 peak. His absence ensured that the memory of his golden era remained pristine. Today, the Steve Miller Band's music is not merely classic, it is timeless. The deliberate decision to retreat from the corrupting influence of the music business in 1982 has ultimately secured the band's legacy, proving that quality songcraft triumphs over transient industry trends. The band's enduring popularity is evidenced by staggering metrics in the digital age. The Steve Miller Band's releases have sold tens of millions of records and accumulated billions of streams. Tracking data confirms the catalog has reached over 2 billion total streams, a continuous, massive global presence that few 70s rock acts can claim. The 1978 compilation, Greatest Hits, remains a cornerstone of American music, validating the audience's memory of the decade. The hooks remain potent, demonstrated by the unexpected 2024 return to the charts when Eminem prominently featured Abracadabra in his hit single Houdini, introducing Miller's sound to a new generation. The Space Cowboy's music transcends time. In recent years, Steve Miller has channeled the frustration and suspicion that drove his early 1980s disappearance into powerful advocacy for musicians. This final stage of his career reinforces the thematic tension that has defined his life, the struggle between artistry and the machinery of commerce. When Miller was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2016, the moment, often seen as an artist's crowning achievement, became a platform for his strongest critique of the industry. Miller publicly excoriated the organization for its lack of transparency, calling the Rock Hall experience a cold, hard deal, and questioning its purpose. What the hell is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and what does it do besides talk about itself and sell postcards? This bold, principled stance serves as the powerful final act of the Space Cowboy. By using the industry's highest honor to deliver his harshest criticism, Miller validated his decades-long insistence that he was fighting for artistic control and respect for his peers. This defiant conclusion evokes pride among fans, confirming that their beloved artist was not only the soundtrack to their youth, but also a man of integrity who successfully navigated and ultimately beat the gangsters and crooks of the music business. Steve Miller's story is the story of an artist who refused to compromise, tutored by legends, proven in the blues crucibles of Chicago, master of the FM radio dial, and ultimately the man who walked away on his own terms. His music endures, not just as nostalgia, but as a monument to highly polished, efficient, and ultimately self-determined rock and roll. The Steve Miller Band proved that the greatest artists don't chase trends, they create them, then walk away before the machine can destroy them. Miller learned from legends, conquered the charts, and vanished on his own terms. His songs remain timeless, playing on radios and streaming platforms decades later, introducing new generations to the Space Cowboy's vision. Which Steve Miller hit defined your youth? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories.